Welcome to Straight Talk. I am Dhaka Tribune editor Zafar Sobhan, and I'm in conversation today with Lutfey Siddiqi. Mr. Siddiqi is an adjunct professor at the National University of Singapore, and until very recently was a visiting professor in practice at the London School of Economics, and before then an investment banker of some repute for the past 2 decades. Mr. Siddiqi, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Okay, well, it's wonderful to have you on the show, and what I'd like to talk to you a little bit about is we have a new government in place here in Bangladesh. There have been many promises made. There's been a lot of talk. The last several years, in fact, have been great years of economic growth in Bangladesh. We've had economic growth of 7% plus, which is one of the best in the world. And the Prime Minister has now pledged that moving forward, she will do even better than that. Even 8%, even 10% is not beyond the realms of possibility. But tell me, Lutfi, what do you think we need to do here in Bangladesh to get to that magical figure of 10% growth?
Sure. I don't presume to know the answer, but what I can tell you is what the perspective is from the outside.
Sure, that sounds good.
Particularly when you look at it relative to some of the other countries that have had
similar
growth trajectories, particularly in the Far East.
Yep.
The first point I'd make is that the real Bangladesh paradox is not what the World Bank has been saying about Bangladesh. To me, the real Bangladesh paradox is that Bangladesh seems to do the hard things really, really well and the easy things less well.
Right.
So on the hard things, you have tremendous headline economic growth, which you just mentioned, and this year projected to be the highest of any major economy in the world. You have tremendous progress in inclusive indices, social and human development indicators. So that is tremendous, and it's not easy to do. The second thing is, again, perhaps underappreciated. Bangladesh does extremely well in a geopolitical context. Whichever way you look.
Explain that a little further?
Sure. Whichever way you look at it, whether it's East, West, China, Japan, India, Islamic, secular, I don't know of any other country in the international context that has balanced all of these geopolitical cross currents, which are pretty strong right now in the way that Bangladesh has done.
Sure, I mean, Bangladesh is a very unique country. As you said, we are at the, with the crossroads of South Asia and Southeast Asia. We've got India here, we've got China there. Islam, which is a massive issue globally, is of course important to us being a Muslim majority country.
That's right.
We touch a lot of these buttons, I think.
Yes, and you have the push and pull of all of these that are that's hyperactive right now. And to be in this place of constructive tension with virtually everybody, where you're courted by virtually everybody as a result of that, I think is a tremendous place to be in, which many other countries would love to have. So this is what I mean by getting the hard things done from us from the outside. Looks like quite easily. What I mean by getting the easy things less well done are 2 related issues. One is when it comes to attracting foreign direct investment. We seem to underperform our benchmark. And the other is when it comes to the ease of doing business. So not just foreign direct investment, but even if it's domestic business, there seems to be a lack of ease, or there could be improvement when it comes
absolutely.
to that.
I mean, from my own personal experience, starting and running a newspaper, which is just a tiny, small business, the amount of hoops you have to jump through to get that off the ground. I have enormous respect for anyone who's actually able to do business in this country, because it's not easy.
Yes. And so if you take those 2 as necessary conditions for getting to double-digit growth that we now want, we know the government wants, and everybody wants to support them in that aspiration, then you've got to deal with them one at a time. And there are 2 broad thrusts of action that need to be taken. One is to deal with perception, and the other is to deal with reality, because there's an issue of both on both sides. I think reality is not as bad as what the perception may be, and so there is a marketing, packaging, branding issue that can be done better. And then, of course, there are real issues on the ground that do need to be tackled. When it comes to, when we say attracting foreign direct investment, you almost need to go back to first principles as to what does it mean to be attracted to something or somebody. It's at the level of chemistry. It's not, I have the best tax rates, or my legislation allows you to do this. So it's not the CV of the person you want to marry, it's whether you have a personal chemistry with the people.
It's something intangible, it's a feeling.
That's right, it's a feeling. Yeah. And the metaphor for me, or the first point of that feeling, is how do I feel when I land at the airport?
Right.
And how do I feel when I'm trying to depart from the airport? So the airport is a massively influential...
absolutely, it's the first thing you see when you come to the country. And I would also add to that is the drive from the airport to wherever it is you're wishing to go to, be it a hotel, be it your home. These have an incredible impact psychologically. Whenever I go to a new country, a large chunk of how I how I relate to it, how I imagine it, is based on these inputs.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, and perhaps this is where it may not be felt as much, it may not be seen as being so important by business elites over here. Yeah. Some of them will say to me, look, we have a lot of issues, but why do you harp on about the airport? It's never an issue for us. And it's because we have a VIP culture, so everyone has a shortcut, and everyone has a way of navigating through it. And that is where I extend the metaphor. I think perhaps one of the reasons why you get good growth coming from domestic sources, but people still say it's not easy doing business, is that everyone has figured out a shortcut way of doing it, and which sometimes I believe gets in the way of improving processes. Which takes me to the second point. So there's perception, and if we can...
and it seems to fix that, as you said, they're fairly not difficult. I won't say simple. Nothing is simple.
Yes.
But they're very doable. They're workable steps one can take.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I mean, imagine if the airport was if we designated the airport as an EPZ, an export processing zone.
Yeah.
We would immediately get into the mindset of what we need to do to fix the airport experience.
Yeah.
But it needs to be seen as important. Again, before I go to the next thing that needs to be done, on the issue of chemistry and courtship and marketing, you go to these international forums, and you and I are both members of the World Economic Forum community. I remember a prime minister hosting a reception at the evening of one of those conferences, and he had the chief ministers of 2 states from his country attending. So you walk in, the Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, they invite you into the reception. And within that, you have 2 stalls at 2 ends of the reception room, each one of them campaigning to bring investments to their particular state. So there's a sense of positive competition going on, with the whole thing geared towards how can I make myself attracting? Where's the customer service in this mentality?
And it's obviously that it's a very, very serious matter to them. They take it very seriously. Yeah, and I think I've read a piece not long ago, someone wrote it on Quora, but a Chinese student actually, talking about that, how he's courted, him and all of the other Chinese students. I think he's a PhD student at Oxford, if I'm not wrong. And he's being courted by the provincial governors.
Right.
And they come in and they throw dinners, say, come back and do your research here. Yeah.
That's right.
Anyway, Lutfey, let's take a commercial break now, but hold that thought. We'll come back and we'll discuss more on how Bangladesh can move to the next level in terms of economic growth.
Sounds good.
Okay. This is Zafar Sobhan in conversation with Lutfey Siddiqi. Please join us after the commercial break. Thank you. This is Zafar Sobhan in conversation with Lutfey Siddiqi on Straight Talk. Thank you for coming back. Lutfey, so I'm really interested in this idea you have that we in Bangladesh, we do, the hard things well, and we probably need to do a better job on things which should actually not be that difficult.
That's right. It's not hard. I get invited to receptions by ambassadors of other countries. I'm on a distribution list that clearly is a mass email sent by an ambassador of another country in the region, which is a summary of foreign direct investments that have gone into that country in the previous 30 days. And it says, by the way, if you would like to know more, this is the number to call. So it's a relatively simple thing to do. It's a matter of appreciating that it is of value. The fact that branding, marketing, campaign, this is not just something the private sector does, but the government can do as well. And in this, members of the diaspora, professional members of the diaspora, you can practice with us. You can mess up with us and there's no consequences. But there's an eagerness from the diaspora to engage. And if you get it right, you can have the multiplier effect of each one of them, us, being ambassadors.
How do we do that? Because of course, you look at India, for instance, you look at some of the explosive growth that India has experienced over the last decades. A lot of it, and not just economic growth, in terms of the change in the mindset, has been driven by the non-resident Indian community. I know a lot of non-resident Bangladeshis, you are one of them, are very keen to engage more with Bangladesh. How do we make that happen?
I think it needs a few iterations, but ideally it could start with a recognition that we value diaspora, not just as a group of people who send remittances over on a regular basis, which if you look at it, I think the vast majority of remittances are involuntary. These are people who need to send money home for their family to survive. If you had a separate criteria for how much voluntary remittance comes in for businesses, that's a different picture. The Commonwealth did a survey recently that I had an opportunity to take part in, and it shows that there is heightened levels of interest to send money to assist on a professional basis. And not just for Bangladesh. To be fair, this is a common problem in the Commonwealth. Everyone can do better. I think digital gives us an opportunity to take it to the next level now.
How
you can create a digital platform which you can cut and slice in all sorts of different ways. The database could be based on your professional expertise, your interests, whether you're looking to invest, whether you're looking to provide mentorship. I think offshore, onshore can come together and create virtual communities through platforms. But to take a step back, I think if there is a signal from the top that says we value diaspora as a community, as a capital base, then you can deploy them for your double-digit growth target. But I should also say that diaspora need to do things differently as well. If we think that we're going to come here and tell people how to do things, which happens a lot, then
that's not going to fly either.
Not only is it not going to fly, it's also incorrect because, as I said, this is the place you come to learn how to do the hard things right. And what we're assisting with is the easy things. I was saying that there is a perception that needs to be changed, but there is, of course, the reality, and it's reflected in the ease of doing business ranking. And here, I think what we need to do now is move from the area of policy and legislation to execution. Not just ask what it is that you will do. So I was very encouraged, for example, to hear the new finance minister mention recently, we would like the private sector to be the engine of economic growth and all of that. And there is very little with anything that is being said as what the government wants to do. The question is how. And how would you know whether you're doing it right or wrong as you go along so that you can course correct?
So you set benchmarks.
Set benchmarks, and these are at the activity level. So the civil service in Singapore many years ago used to have targets. How many foreign chief executives will you cold call, and ask them to come and invest in my country? So execution and process need to be taken to the next level. The dashboard needs to be made clear. Digital Bangladesh, which is a tremendous success as an infrastructure process, it is a necessary condition for doing a lot of these things, but it only becomes a sufficient condition if digital becomes a mindset. So the digital mindset is that every time a file moves through a government process, in the same way that when I send a parcel through DHL, I can go online and track exactly where it is right now. Ideally, you'd like a DHL tracker for everything that's moving through the process. And in the same way that after I stay at a hotel, I can go to TripAdvisor and leave my feedback on how that experience was. We should have a TripAdvisor for services as well. And what you'll find is there is a bandwagon effect. People would want to do well in that scoring if they know that they're being assessed based on that. So a scoring mechanism for execution, having a service mentality, I think those will take us a long way.
Okay.
You can't quite boil the ocean all at the same time. Clearly, it's take time. And here again, I would say you bifurcate a few areas that you say, look, these are the ones that we would like to really focus on and get it up to.
Ring fence them.
Ring fence them.
Yeah.
And again, export processing zones,
yes.
it ring fences a geographical area.
Yeah.
But if you think about that as export processing zones as a mindset,
yeah.
where all of the processes related to these sectors,
yeah.
we will treat differently.
Yeah.
Or
and I think that's happened very successfully in other countries, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, and in Bangladesh it has happened with the cricket team.
Yes.
Right, you can't, I got vilified 12 years ago, I said, and rightly so. I remember I was at an event here and I said, how is it that we can't find a country that big as this? I can't find 11 players that can beat New Zealand in cricket, which has a population less than Dhanmondi over here. And
considerably, I would suspect.
Considerably. And of course now I'm eating my words because it's a tremendous success story. But if you think about what is it?
How?
Yes. So there is no hesitation in hiring the best coach. Do you ask whether that person is domestic or foreign or from this country or that?
Yeah.
You go for the best person for the job. In other countries, when they select the chairman of the Securities Commission, for example, or chairman of the Board of Investment equivalent, they would advertise for the best person of the job. Why is it that cricket cannot hide behind lack of process and execution? Because you see the results straight away.
Yeah.
You have the TripAdvisor on the scorecard within the end of the game.
I love it, and I think that's language Bangladeshis do understand, because we're so cricket mad. He said, why can't we make the rest of the country like the cricket team? And on that note, we're going to take another break. Okay. We'll be back discussing this and other issues after the break. Thank you, Lutfey. Please join us after the break. This is Zafar Sobhan in conversation with Lutfey Siddiqi on Straight Talk. Thank you. This is Zafar Sobhan in conversation with Lutfey Siddiqi on Straight Talk. Thank you for being with us. So Lutfey, let's talk a little bit more about the ease of doing business. Yes. You said in terms of the ease of doing business index. What have other countries done, perhaps? Yes. Is there some lessons we could learn there?
Yes, I think there's certainly other examples we can look at, and maybe not transplant, but at least get a sense of what's going on. And the one thing that Bangladesh is doing, which I think needs to be encouraged, is this concept of a one portal, single portal, one-stop service.
Right.
But we just have to bear in mind that it's the service element which is emphasized. Otherwise it could become the one-stop choke point.
Right, of course. And turn a positive into a negative.
That's right. So at least now, when it's multiple service, if you're lucky, you get somebody who's really dealing with it properly and quickly.
You can try your luck in several different avenues.
Yes, that's right. But let's not take anything away from the fact that one-stop service is a great thing to do. Yeah. And one of the countries that I look at that have done well in recent years and coming from sub 100 levels to much better, Indonesia, they've done a good job of one-stop service, including if you've got an expatriate who's going to spend some time over here, can I help with the school admissions of their children, all in that one-stop service. But the country that perhaps, I mean, I certainly wasn't aware of, is Georgia, the ex-Soviet republic.
Is that right? Okay, yeah.
And there's the former economy minister of Georgia, is a lady called Vera Kobalya, who I would recommend that we bring in and listen to her in some way. So she was actually one of the advisors to the Indonesian government after she left Georgia as government. And Georgia was 120 something in the ranking 12 years ago. They went from that to 77. Now they're 6th or 7th.
Wow,
so it's a dramatic movement.
Change,
that's right. And they've done a whole host of things, but a couple that I want to mention. One is they have this one government rule, which says that if you need something that already exists in another part of government, if you need my passport or my driving license, it already exists somewhere else, then you get it from the other part of government. Don't ask me to give you a fresh set of information. So you on the government side should recognize you're not a member of that department, you're a member of one government. So that's the one government rule. And the other one that I really like is that it's a silence is consent rule.
Okay.
So every process has a statutory time limit. If I do not hear from you within the next 10 days, I assume that I have approval to do what I want to do. And if you don't want me to do it, you better get back to me in 10 days and let's engage. But to stonewall with radio silence is not something that is acceptable.
No, and I'll tell you something which is interesting, sort of the Bangladeshi mindset, something we need to come out of, is that oftentimes when you're trying to do something, people will ask you, where's the law which says you're able to do what you want to do?
Right.
And I would say, well, where's the law that says I
Flip
can't?
it around, exactly.
And that's how it should be. That should be the mindset.
That's right. And the other thing which I hear the Indonesians have done very well is, well, firstly, for any government, the first chunk of time is really crucial. Beyond a year, you can't really do major reforms.
Right.
You've got to really go for shock and awe and do it in the first.
Okay, that's interesting.
First
So this
period.
I think the conventional wisdom, as I've heard it, is that it takes you a while to get up to flying speed.
Right.
But that's not it. You need to do it immediately. You
There's
have
some
the
academic
goodwill.
study. That's right. I forget which one it is. Some academic study that shows that 85% of reforms that get implemented on a cross-border, cross-country basis need to happen in the first 12 to 18 months.
Okay.
Because after that, you go into defensive mode.
Got it.
Then you start justifying, why you've already done it well. So shock and awe and speed is...
so this is it. That's good to know.
You've got to strike where it's hot. And the one thing the Indonesians did is they broke down the ease of doing business index. And look, they're not great on an absolute basis. They've probably come from 107 to 77 right now, so they still have a long way to go. But they felt to move the needle, the president needs to get behind one or two subcomponents.
Right.
So for example, there's one subcomponent which is how long does it take to resolve insolvency in the courts?
Okay.
They took that one and they said, well, we are 75th or something on that one, and we'd like to bring it down to, we'd like to halve that in 1 year.
Yeah.
So all the energies went into that one metric.
Yeah.
And what happens is, by osmosis, everything else also moves in the same direction.
Right.
But the tone at the top is set for that one metric that we have to do well on.
Now, if you decide that this is something we want to do, who has to drive the process? Where, is there a czar of ease of doing business? Is it the finance ministry? Is it the planning ministry? Where is it?
So you do need a czar to do that. You need, first of all, tone at the top and messaging that comes from the Prime Minister.
Absolutely.
And a large part of it is finance related, so the Finance Minister has to be involved. My understanding is that the chairman of this process, the board that does it in Indonesia, I believe he has a ministerial rank.
Okay.
He, I believe, sits in on cabinet, even if he's not a full member of cabinet.
Okay.
But definitely the ability to rise above departmental silos and just follow through on that.
So there's actually someone with a cabinet level position whose specific focus and specific job is to make sure that it's easier to do business in Indonesia.
That's right. And in the Indonesia case, they hired the person, Vera Kabalia, my friend from Georgia. In this case, it was paid for by the Australians.
Okay.
So the Australian.
So was she the czar, or was she an advisor?
She was the advisor
to
this. So it's entirely executed by domestic
I would imagine
people.
that the czar
But she was the equivalent of the cricket coach that was brought in from outside.
Absolutely.
To help with that. And then on the international front, they do tremendous work. I'll give you a quick example. I was at the World Bank Annual Summit. Not 2007, 2016 in DC. 2017, it was going to be held in Bali in Indonesia.
Right.
So at the 2016 event in DC, there was a big Indonesian contingent. They wanted to make sure that people turn up to the Bali one the year after. So you saw all the usual paraphernalia. But what I thought was amazing is we were all in a full day of meeting, you're drinking coffee, it's a bit hot, stuffy rooms, and you come out and you've got somebody wearing an Indonesian batik with a little glass of coconut water that they had brought in, and that's the first thing you want. So you're sipping it, and they're telling you why you should be in Bali the following year, and they're very agile, very marketing based. In Davos, the Indonesia night is the one that everyone wants to go to because the food is great. You go for the food, and then while they have you there, they make sure that they're selling to you.
Yes.
And for that, they use diaspora, they use people from outside.
Yeah.
It's a good mix.
And I think the main thing is that they've made a real commitment
yes.
to saying that this is what we want to do, and they've really looked at it on a granular level. How yes. do we get it done?
And they've connected the dots all the way
yeah.
through to, well, we're not doing it because for the sake of it, it's because the big picture here is we need double-digit growth.
Yeah.
In the case of Bangladesh, in their case, they need 2 extra percentage points of growth.
Right.
And if this is not the way to do it, then you tell me what's the other way to do
yeah.
it.
Okay, super. Well, thank you so much, Lutfey. I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's been a lot of food for thought for me, for our viewers as well, I'm sure, and I hope that other people in the policy-making establishment or the other people who think about these issues have been tuning in as well. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in. This is Zafar Sobhan. I've been in conversation with Lutfey Siddiqi, and I hope to see you again next week. Thank you very much.